Well, hello, everyone, dear Penn Live and Patriot News readers and now viewers, because we're also on the social media airwaves. But I want to welcome everyone to what is the start of Penn Live's editorial board meetings with candidates for the major offices in the November 2024 elections. This is our way of helping our readers become better informed. It is our way of allowing us to really present the candidates in a way that they can explain who they are, what their positions are, and that will allow us to simply give that information to our viewers without telling you how to vote. We can give you the information you need to vote well. So, with that, I want to at least welcome the candidate for Pennsylvania Attorney General, Dave Sunday. Dave, welcome.
Good morning. It's absolutely wonderful to be here with everyone, and I'm grateful for your time.
Well, before we get started, Mr. Sunday, I need to at least let you know and let our viewers know who's here. We do have members of our editorial board, but first I'd like to start with Evie De Jesus, who is a Penn Live reporter. And actually, Evie, do you want to tell them what your role will be?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I am covering the Attorney General's race this election cycle, among other races, but I'm covering the AG's race. So when you have Eugene DePasquale, I'll be joining in as well.
Thank you very much, Evie. It's great to have you here. And we also have Vinnie Portzline, Reverend Sandy Strauss, Jeffrey Lord, and Rajette Harris, who are all members of our editorial board. And we welcome them all, and they will likely have some questions for you too as we proceed. But that's our introductions. Let me now turn the floor over to Dave Sunny. And the first thing we want to know, Dave, is who are you? Tell
Sure.
us a
Yeah.
little bit about you, about your
Yeah.
background, and then we'll move from there. Go right ahead.
Wonderful. Absolutely. So, by way of background, I'm 49. I grew up in Harrisburg, and I lived in. For those of you that are in Harrisburg, I grew up in Union Deposit, and I lived in Pembroke then for about 7 years, and then my parents moved to Cumberland County, so I went to high school there. I was, a little. I'm going to say a little directionless as a kid. To be honest, when I was young, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was and I just had no idea. So when I was 18, I went to the military recruiter and I joined the Navy. So I was a young man. I was 18. I was enlisted. So I was an E1. And for those of you that know about the military, that's literally the lowest rank that exists. And so I swabbed decks on a ship. I chipped paint. I did all that type of work, and I was deployed for 4 years. I was active duty in the Navy, and so I was deployed to the Persian Gulf, where I was there during Operation Desert Strike with the Carl Vinson Battle Group, and then I came. We were all over the world. I was in Africa. I spent a lot of time in Central and South America doing counter drug operations, where we board drug runner ships. So I've been to Panama, Colombia, every country in South America. I came home and I didn't go to college at that point. I had no college education. I had no job, and so I started working at UPS. And that's the UPS on 19th and Paxton Street. For those of you that are familiar with the Harrisburg hub, I started working there, and I started at community college at Hack. Community college gave me an opportunity. They welcomed me as a returning veteran, and I'll never, forget that. So I worked at UPS all 4 years of my undergrad. So I went to Hack for the first 2 years, Penn State Harrisburg for the second two, where I obtained a degree in finance. And then I worked at UPS during the day, and I went to law school at night. And so I always share those first 12 years, those 4 years active duty in the Navy, followed by 8 years at UPS, because I mean, it's who I am. My father is a retired public school teacher. He was a Marine before that. My mother worked for an insurance company, and she's from the coal region, Shamokin, if anyone knows where Shamokin is. And so I ended up getting, so at the end of law school, I obtained an internship, which was a really unique opportunity for me at the United Nations in New York. And so I went there, I went to New York for the summer, and I met my wife. So my wife is from Sri Lanka. She's an attorney, and she's a naturalized citizen. And so we met in New York, and I somehow convinced her to come to Central Pennsylvania, where we ultimately raise our family. And so I have a son who's in fourth grade. He just started fourth grade, and after law school, I got a job as a law clerk for a judge in York County. And so that's how I ended up in York. And after the law clerkship, I then went right into the district attorney's office. And so I'm going into my 17th year in York County. The York County DA's office, and this is really, really important. The York County DA's office is directly north of Baltimore, as many of you know. And so because of that, I mean, my life was open to many, many things that I could have never imagined when I first got to the DA's office. And so to that point, I started at the bottom, meaning like doing your summary conviction, like traffic stuff, and I worked all the way up to the top, where I ended up running our felony drug unit. I ran our major crimes unit. I was our chief of litigation. I was for 4 years. I was a special assistant United States attorney, where we coordinated large scale gang conspiracy cases here in the Middle District as a federal prosecutor. And so I was elected district attorney, and then I was reelected DA. So my experience in the vast majority of my career was in a courtroom. I have tried many, many, many first degree murder cases, murders of domestic violence homicides, gang homicides. I mean, attempted murder of police officers, embezzlement cases, elder fraud cases, murder of a young child. And so that's the experience. That's my path to standing here on Zoom with you guys today. Now, why I'm running for attorney general is because of the work I've actually not done in a courtroom. It's the work that we've done on crime prevention. So to start with, York County has been decimated by the opioid epidemic. And so 10 years ago, I started working with our county coroner to not only identify ways to, well, really to understand the epidemic. And this is before the lawsuits. This is before it was in the news every day. And so she and I traveled all of York County, and we met with families, we met with the faith-based community, and we discovered that this is a epidemic that was destroying families. And so my philosophy of criminal justice is accountability and redemption. You have to have both. You have to hold people accountable. And so what we did, obviously, everything we could to stop traffickers. At the same time, we embraced redemption, which ultimately led to a nonprofit that we started in York called the York Opioid Collaborative, where we work with the faith-based community, police, parents who've lost their children. And I'm going to tell you right now that I, as a prosecutor, are very few instances of suffering that I've seen in this world, like parents who have slowly watched their children drift off into addiction. I mean, I've watched it, and it's so gut-wrenching. And so I believe we have to do everything we can to get people to decrease barriers to treatment, to increase access to treatment. This has impacted my criminal justice policies in my office, where we have early termination of probation initiatives where people work, where people can get treatment, where I've pushed our drug treatment courts heavily, where we've done so much work in our prison to be able to create opportunities for treatment to happen there. In addition to that, we were one of the first counties in Pennsylvania for the police to all carry naloxone, and over probably close to 10,000 lives have been saved as a result of that. So through that process, we then took a dive into the mental health crisis, because Pennsylvania has a severe mental health crisis. Our prisons have become the de facto mental health providers in Pennsylvania, which I think is just outrageous. And so we then said, we were able to lower our overdose death rates, and we have by 26%. What about mental health? Let's get into this. And so we partnered with WellSpan, who's our regional healthcare provider. We've partnered with the police, and we've created amazing initiatives that help get people that are in mental health crisis into outpatient treatment instead of having them go to a prison cell. That is absolutely critical, and I have so much data on that. Okay, then there's the third prong of this, and this goes back to UPS, and this is very near and dear to my heart. When I worked at UPS, I worked with men and women that were on probation, parole, work release. And I'm going to tell you right now that I have seen magic happen when people have a career, when they start to feel a sense of value and purpose, when they start making money, they can take care of their families. And I never forgot it. And 95% of everyone that goes into a prison is coming back out. 95%. And so what we did was we partnered with our manufacturers association in York. We went to employers, and we have set up this amazing initiative. And about a month ago, and I think you guys might have covered it, I'm not sure, we started our reentry opportunity center in our prison, okay, where we actually can start job interviews, where we can start setting people up for the wraparound services for when they get out of prison. This is near, like, Harley Davidson is a second chance hire for us. And so we've done all this work that has resulted in a 41% decrease in crime in York County from the 10-year high. Our prison population is down by half since the 10-year high. We've saved millions of dollars for taxpayers, and this has become the passion, really the passion of my professional life. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, if communities aren't safe, nothing else matters. And to that point, we then have all those additional resources. And I work hand in hand with Commissioner Muldrow, who's our York City Police Chief, and we've been able to do this group violence initiative, and we've lowered our homicide rate in the city of York by 75%, and we've lowered our gang gun violence rate by 80%. And so through all of this, I'm going to tell you guys right now, even though there's a lot of negativity in the world, I have seen amazing positive things through this work in criminal justice. I have seen people work together from all walks of life, from all communities. It doesn't even matter who you are or where you're from. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, I'm the eternal optimist. And I believe that these type of initiatives, this is a type of work that really can bring our communities, and our state together. And so I know that was a lot. I apologize, but I
That's
just
all
wanted
right.
to kind of get it all out there for you. Like I said, it's an honor to be here. I feel very blessed to be here, standing here with you guys. And so, in a nutshell, that's who I am.
Well, that was quite a lot. That's quite a lot, and we can hear your passion there. There's no doubt about that. So let me just see if I can condense a little bit while our editorial board gets their little juices flowing there with their questions. But it sounds to me like if I were to name your priorities and the things that you are focused on, it would start with the opioid epidemic. That you still believe that lots more needs to be done there, but you've done a lot to try to tackle that, at least in York. You also mentioned mental health, the mental health crisis that is just throughout the nation, but certainly throughout Pennsylvania. And you're focused on trying to see what your good offices can do to impact mental health. You also mentioned significant decreases in crime and homicide and in gang violence. And I guess what I want to ask you is those statistics too. Have they? I'm sure they're your statistics, but have they been corroborated? Is everybody on board that this has really happened? Right? It's not false
Yes.
news. And wait, and then the last thing I think you mentioned, you seem to put a lot of emphasis on reentry and what you call redemption.
Yes.
And is that kind of a concise summary of what you're about?
That is a great summary, actually. I mean, yes, and just with regard to the data is wonderful because that's come through our group violence initiative, and so so there's, I mean, that's the data. And the great thing is because we have so many public-private partnerships, it's critical that we keep accurate data, because you can't just go to a company like WellSpan and say, "Hey, things are going great." Like, let's, and they keep their own data as well with regard to emergency room visits from gunshot wounds and things of that nature. So, yep.
Right. Well, very good. I do see Reverend Sandy Strauss is has her hand up. So go right ahead, Reverend Strauss.
Yes, I really do appreciate what you had to say about how you're dealing with this in York County. As a faith advocate for a number of years, these are the sorts of things that we were advocating for at that level. But
Yeah.
question, at the state level, it seems
Yep.
to me that there's going to be more going on in terms of things, white collar crimes and that kind of thing. And I'd really like to hear more about
Yep.
how you would address that.
Absolutely. So, by way of background, we have, as you know, Pennsylvania's got the second highest amount of senior citizens in the country, and the vast majority of white collar crime that we see, and also when I talk about York, I want you to understand that I'm on the executive board of the District Attorneys Association. I'm the chair of education and training for the District Attorneys Association. I just finished a 4-year tour on the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission, and I was the DA that served on the Mental Health and Justice Advisory Commission for the state. I only say that because I collaborate with district attorneys, police chiefs, community members all throughout Pennsylvania. I just wanted to kind of set that framework there. So when we go to economic crime, that's a huge issue. And so and I want to turn to seniors first, because we typically right now we're probably fourth or fifth in the state for the amount of criminal cases. So it's a great sort of picture. And also being on the sentencing commission, I can tell you that the most scams and the most economic crimes we see right now are against senior citizens. The average amount of money that is stolen from a senior during a scam is around $28,000. And so I don't know about you, but if someone took $28,000 from me, there'd be trouble in paradise. And so to that point, we started an elder abuse task force in New York. And so I collaborated with the AARP, collaborated with the area on aging. Again, the faith-based community is involved in everything we do. The community, our senior centers, and we did everything we could to prevent that from happening in the first place. Now, my degree's in finance, and so the way a lot of DA's offices work, whoever can read a balance sheet ends up doing a lot of these economic prosecutions. And so that's one of the things that I've done. I took a large scale embezzlement case to a jury trial, where someone stole a lot of money from a company successfully and achieved convictions there. But I want to turn back to seniors because, I think that I'm not sure specifically if you're looking for specifics, but what I can tell you is that, when you take a senior's money, most of these individuals are on like fixed income. Like my grandmother, my nana, this happened to her. Okay. And when this happened to her, it was devastating, devastating. And so, number one, I have the background and the experience to do all of the work on prevention. And actually, I'm going to ramp up the prevention side of this. And the reason for that is because what we're seeing now is, with the advent of AI, the scams have become so complex that even police officers and prosecutors have to take time to figure out whether or not they're really a scam or not. And so we're at a place where if we can't get ahead of this, we're in trouble. Most of the money that's stolen from seniors, it's not coming back because it's going to faraway countries, and it's lost. As a former federal prosecutor, like I partnered with the FBI on a lot of these, on investigating these cases, on doing this type of work. And I can tell you right now, the biggest impact we can have is on prevention. At the same time, people are getting creative with the internet. And so we're seeing more and more people in the continental United States and in Pennsylvania that are trying to make money off of this because everyone thinks they can use the internet for whatever they want to do. And so we started a cybercrime team, okay, to be able to really take a deep dive and prosecute these cases. I think it is absolutely critical that we increase our cyber capabilities for protection, but also make sure that we prosecute these cases. I know, again, that's a long-winded answer. I apologize, but these are major, major issues. When companies steal money from their employees, they have to be held accountable. And the case that I tried was a case where a CFO stole a lot of money from a company that impacted workers that ended up having to all be laid off as a result of what he did. And no one thought I could win that trial. I took it to a jury trial and we won and convicted him of every single felony count.
Very good. Well, I hope your question was answered, Reverend Strauss. Did you have a follow-up? I guess she's okay.
I think she froze, actually.
Yeah, I see. Well, all right. Do we have any other questions? If not, I will continue a question because you've raised several things that clearly the existing Attorney General's office is also tackling. They're doing cybercrime and they're doing elder abuse and all of that. And that's a good point. We really need to do more actually to inform older people about the scams that are out there on the media side. But I wanted to ask you, as you look at the Attorney General's office in general, and I'm sure you've investigated and kind of done your research, what is it that you think is strong, and what is it that you think you would change or things that you would add?
Sure. So to begin with, as an elected DA, I worked with who was AG Josh Shapiro at that time period. We had a seamless relationship with all these issues. And now Michelle Henry, it's the same situation. I'm friends with the current Attorney General, and I think that they're doing a great job. When I look at the job of a prosecutor, and remember, by law, by statute, the Attorney General is Pennsylvania's chief prosecutor. It's a chief law enforcement officer by statute. Our job is to not break down, but to build. And what I mean by that, it's to build upon all the great work that has come before us. And so every attorney general along the way, just like all the district attorneys along the way, have done a tremendous amount of work. The reality is, as the years go on, the challenges change with regard to technology oftentimes. And so what I would seek to do is to build upon the great foundational work that has already been done. I look forward to working with the prosecutors in the AG's office as colleagues. I'm excited about it. I bring certain skill sets to this by being a career prosecutor and by being someone who has fought, gangs, who has done all of this through the course of my career. But in particular, when we look at opioids and when we look at mental health, those are areas that we can never do enough. I think, in particular, with the mental health crisis, that's an area where we can really lead. We should be a nationwide leader in that issue, and we have to do everything we can to increase the work we do with mental health. Because remember, mental health, let's even take out of it just because we're good humans and think it needs to be done. But when you look at the criminal justice system, addiction and mental health account, they're either directly or tangentially related to probably 75% of all of the crime in Pennsylvania. And when you look at that crime and you walk it back, I mean, the amount of trauma on children right now is just outrageous. I mean, there are children in certain parts of Pennsylvania that have more trauma than, or the same amount of trauma as veterans coming out of war zones. When we look at children, I mean, I advocate for early childhood education and high quality pre-K. I mean, we have to, like, this job and being a prosecutor, and I hate to digress slightly, I'm sure it's, but we have to leave politics at the door. When you are a district attorney, when you're a prosecutor, you are here for a sole purpose, and that is to enforce the law and keep citizens safe. And so I look forward very simply to building upon the great work that has been done, but I really want to increase the work that's being done in mental health in particular.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how would you do that? I mean, you've raised a lot of issues, but it makes me wonder, well, really, what
Yep.
can an attorney general actually do it other than have a bully pulpit,
Okay.
perhaps? But
So, for example, right now, the AG's office, they have an outstanding initiative called the Law Enforcement Treatment Initiative, LETI. Okay. And that initiative is something that, because you have to remember, all of our criminal justice initiatives have to be driven by the local district attorneys and the local police. Meaning, if you don't have buy-in from them, it doesn't happen. And then when you look at the private partnership side of it, for example, our private partnerships with WellSpan, you have to be able to go to these institutions and prove, to someone who, even though hospitals are nonprofits, we know that, you have to prove that it's financially sustainable. And most of these offices don't have the expertise to do that. And it's because, I mean, a lot of these DA's offices, they're fighting to get through the day.
mm,
We are unbelievably low amount of police officers in Pennsylvania, children, youth, and family workers, prosecutors, public defenders, and so the system is already beyond strained, resource wise, beyond strained. And so when you look at that and understand it, you have to have proven initiatives at work. In York, we have what's called the CARD, C-A-R-D. Please Google it, look it up. The CARD project, where we work with WellSpan. We've created a clinic, it's called the START Clinic, where people through the co-responder model can be taken, okay, to have an instant mental health assessment and have other wraparound services put together at that point in time. WellSpan has saved millions of dollars in decreased emergency room visits. So, similar to the LETI model with the AG's office, we can put together a mental health model where we can go around the Commonwealth and we can show people, we can provide the expertise, we can provide them the data, and we can be people that sort of the backroom operators that help to make sure that these initiatives run properly. In today's world, very simply, everybody is unbelievably stressed with resources. But when you show them a model that works, something that saves money, that saves taxpayer dollars, people want to do it. And as a DA, current DA, who works with all the DAs, except for one, there's one that's not a member of our association, but all the DAs in Pennsylvania, okay, I have those relationships to have those conversations. And I know that most of them would love to do this stuff. Someone's got to help them.
okay. All right. Right. So you've got some ambitious plans there, the things that really will be relevant to Pennsylvanians. But one question that I really wanted to throw out at you to allow you a chance. We all, as we look back on our lives and on our careers, have things that we thought we were really good at, and other things that we thought, oops, made a mistake there, didn't quite do things right there. I have a regret there. And I'm wondering, as you look back, are there any things, any issues that or that you regret, that things clearly that you're proud of? We've heard a lot of that, and for good reason.
Yeah.
But what about those regrets, those things that could have gone better?
So I do. And, when you look at prosecutors around the country and you look at prosecutors, just being a prosecutor, um, we've evolved in a lot of ways. And so you have, unfortunately, there's a lot of discussion about, progressive prosecutors. And at the same time, I'm sure you have other people that are doing crazy stuff. But the reality is, when I first started as a prosecutor, we didn't know anything about addiction. We didn't know anything about, like, we didn't understand it. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about, the impact on families. Like, these weren't things that were part of our daily life like they are now. And, even though it was the common practice at the time when I started, I look back and I think about, as a young prosecutor, when I went into a courtroom, you know, we were given hundreds and hundreds of files, and we were just sent to work, and we were just put in a courtroom, and you look at your file and you have sentencing guidelines, and you're just basically, doing your best to get through the day. Now, in today's world, we have so much thought that goes into sentencing. I mean, you basically need a PhD to be able to do it. And I look back on the way we did it initially, and even though it was what everybody did, and even though um, it was the best practice at the time, I really wish I understood addiction better when I first started as a prosecutor. Because if I did, I mean, I just, the things we're doing now, if we could have started that earlier, um, I just think that it would be, as a society, we'd probably be in a better place. And even though I don't blame myself for that, because that's what everybody did at the time, um, I just, I look back on it, and I wish that we just really spent more time understanding addiction and its impact on the criminal justice system.
I'm going to let Vinny come in, but I want to follow up just a tidbit on that, because in minority communities, there is the feeling that when this addiction thing was ravaging us, our young people got thrown into prison. And it wasn't until it hit the white suburbs that people started having compassion. So I'm just wondering, I'd just be interested in
Yep,
getting your thoughts on that.
absolutely. Do you want me to answer that
Yes,
first?
please. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the great blessings in my life has been my partnership with the York City Black Ministers Association. It's really changed my life in many ways. It's and through that, when you go back to 2020, I was the elected DA during that time period, and I decided that I wanted to just understand I wanted to understand everything, and so I went into the community, and spent a lot of time, day in and day out, with the Black ministers, with people that were suffering um, in different ways. And I learned a lot. And, my point in saying that very simply is this: that when I started as a prosecutor, it was, I'll say, at the tail end of that, because, we were sort of morphing into heroin at that point. But, it saddens me that that would have been the case. And I think that every citizen, every human being deserves to be treated the same. Um, I've done so much work in this area, with regard to ensuring fair and equal treatment for people in the criminal justice system. I mean, I just, I think that, even when you look at our drug offenses, for example, I mean, we do entire assessments on the individual, and we do everything we can. And again, that's where, so for example, when I talk about reentry, a lot of our reentrants are members of the Black community who were in jail for drug trafficking. And these are people that, that are my friends, or my personal friends. And so what I can say is, I can't rewrite wrongs that may have occurred in the criminal justice system. But what I can do and what I have done and what I'm committed to doing is making sure that it doesn't happen again.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Vinny because she's had her hand up for a while. Vinny, go right ahead.
Okay, I have 2 points. The first one is on addiction. My son was addicted and he died. He died in a recovery house. And as a mom, you think his son is safe. And I found that there were no oversights of these recovery homes, and they would take money for rent, and so I was wondering if anything is new being done with that. And also been following the money that counties have gotten to combat this issue, but I'm not feeling confident that anything is really getting done. People are fighting among themselves, but to go for enforcement, to go for treatment. And is anybody paying attention and helping these people?
So 3 things. Number 1, I'm so sorry for your loss. I didn't know that obviously when I was talking about it. And so I'm sorry that you've been through that. And I hope that I didn't say anything that, but when you're talking about recovery homes, that's been a huge issue. So I, that's a giant issue. Because there are a lot of recovery homes, as you well know, well, actually sober living homes, that, I mean, that they're not regulated. That anyone can open one. And that's been a huge issue for us in Pennsylvania, and in York County in particular, that's been a huge issue. Um, I know that it's been difficult, and for the legislature to create a system to regulate those homes because of certain constitutional protections and things of that nature. But very simply, that's a giant issue. This is why, I mean, to me, this is the issue of our time. And so, even though I didn't discuss it in my opening monologue, the issue of recovery homes is a huge issue, and that's something that I'm looking very forward to working with people like Deb Beck. I don't know if you know who Deb Beck is, and others out there on this. So I don't have an answer for you on recovery homes because it's really convoluted. And I wish I did, but what I can tell you is I know how critical that is, and I know how important it is that we find a way to make sure that there aren't, terrible recovery homes out there that aren't doing anything to help anyone other than making a little bit of money and putting people right in the same people, places, and things where they left in the first place. So that's my answer to that. And what was the third one? I'm sorry.
Oh, the money.
The money. Okay, so York County, we were one of the first counties in Pennsylvania to join into that lawsuit. And I can't speak to how other places are doing it, but we have an entire board set up that processes all of this. I mean, the money I know, and according to the master settlement agreement, has to go towards treatment. I don't think that money can even go to enforcement. That's my understanding. And so I know that all of the money that the processes in York County, all of it goes to treatment. It goes through a board that looks at it. It's a transparent process, and it's all geared towards increasing access to treatment for the citizens.
Thank you. I know Spotlight PA has been following this.
Yeah.
Another question, Joyce.
All right, we have Sandy waiting there, but go right ahead. Quickly.
I was looking at our Attorney General website, and one of the things that they talk about is reproductive rights. And I'm wondering if you will continue in that way that they are supporting women in their autonomy, deciding what is best for them.
Well, I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I apologize. I couldn't understand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a cold. The website is talking about reproductive rights. Attorney General currently. And I'm wondering how you feel about supporting women in their reproductive rights.
I think to be clear, the question is, what is your stand on abortion?
Okay, so
there
to
is
begin
a
with,
medication that they were talking about on the Attorney General website. That was one. And so there's all this talk about birth control, prohibiting different medications. So yeah,
I mean, I can make this very clear. So as clear as this could be, I'm going to make it clear. So to begin with, The Attorney General, as you know, is Pennsylvania's chief prosecutor, chief law enforcement officer. And I just want to say that to start to frame this out. You know, and I know everyone on this call knows, but I always like to say the law in Pennsylvania is clear. Abortion is legal through the 23rd week of pregnancy, and that's the end of the second trimester. After that, there are exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. That's the law in Pennsylvania. That's been the law in Pennsylvania for over 40 years. I was like 6 when that law was passed, and that's clearly a long time ago. That's settled law. That's a law that's been passed by the legislature, signed into law by the governor. And to that point, my commitment, and I was literally just talking to my wife about this. The reality is the best way to protect democracy and protect women's rights is to enforce the law as it's written. And that's what I will do. And that's my commitment to the citizens of Pennsylvania, is that I will enforce the law. I don't think that the AG by law cannot be an activist. Okay, the AG has to follow the laws as passed by the legislature, signed into law by the governor. With regard to the website, very simply, if it's supported by the law, then it stays. That's it. I think that we need to get back to a place in society where we are focused in this role in following the law as it's been passed by the legislature, signed into law by the governor. Because if you deviate from that, and if I would just enforce things based on how I woke up that morning, then you're creating chaos in society because citizens don't know what the rules of the game are. You know, they don't know what's expected of them. And so, very simply, my commitment to the citizens of Pennsylvania is I will follow the law, and that's my position.
Thank you.
All right, let's bring in Reverend Strauss. Reverend Strauss, your hand's been up a while too. Go ahead.
That's okay. I've been hearing more and more recently about police departments around the country, instead of having police going in to deal with mental health crises, which of course then creates the condition where something happens and people end up in jail, end up in prison. Hiring social workers or other folks to work with them to try to diffuse those sort of situations. Is this something you've looked into that might be a possibility to
Yes.
promote in Pennsylvania?
So those are called co-responders, and in York County, we have co-responders embedded in all of our police departments. So when I talked earlier about our initiative that helps get people into mental health treatment, the method that's done is through the co-responders. This is a law enforcement driven initiative, and people need to understand that. I mean, it's really been sort of twisted what they are. They're a tool for police to use. So when police go to a mental health call, and let's say there's no crime that occurred, it's someone who's just in the throes of a mental health crisis, the police then have the option of calling the co-responder. The co-responder shows up, they engage with the individual, and they're all trained mental health counselors. And then they do basically a warm handoff where they convince that person essentially to going to the START clinic. They go to the clinic, and there they get a full assessment, and oftentimes that can result in outpatient mental health treatment, but you need the co-responders to do that. The other thing that's really important with that is it saves taxpayers millions of dollars. And one of the ways we've been able to tackle violent crime is because through our co-responders and through these initiatives, it has sort of taken these non-traditional policing roles and moved it away from the police and put them in a position where they can go get the bad guys. Okay. Keep in mind, you're not replacing police with anything. This is just one of many tools that a police officer has at their disposal to be able to handle any given situation. And it's really important because we've asked our police in today's world to be domestic violence counselors, mental health counselors, substance abuse counselors. We've asked them to be everything to every person in a split second within an 8-hour shift. And at the same time, we're at a crisis point with people that even want to be police. And so the goal is obviously to take some of those specialty areas, and after the police officer makes something safe, and it's their decision, hey, this person's committing assault, I'm going to arrest them, or this person's just freaking out in the middle of the road, let's get a co-responder in here. Because if you look at most of the very serious crimes in society, and you forensically walk backwards through that person's life, many times you'll find that they engaged the criminal justice system via a mental health crisis that was never taken care of. And so these are all public safety initiatives. So when someone says to me, like, what are you talking about here, Dave? What I'm talking about is how our crime rate dropped by 41% was through these initiatives. But the other part of this is, when you help these individuals, you're keeping families together. And I want to stress that. One of the number one problems I see in society is the breakdown of families. Okay, regardless of what that family looks like, your family. And so we're at a place now where when we can help these people, the data shows that when you keep families together, it decreases the child's, it decreases the trauma that they have. It puts them in a safer place, in a healthier place in life. I mean, these are things that are really important. But I want to thank you for asking me about this, and here's why. Because in today's world, politics oftentimes revolves around this cell phone right here and tweeting things, okay, or posting things. Some of the biggest problems in society aren't things that can be fixed in a day. Okay, these are long term issues that could take decades, and politicians have to have the courage to attack these issues, and attack them in a manner that the society understands why it's important to do it. And so, I'm grateful that you're asking me these questions because, I can tell you right now, when I campaign in the furthest right places in Pennsylvania or the furthest left places in Pennsylvania, I'm going to tell you that there are so many things that bind us. And one of the absolute main things I hear from people from West Philadelphia to name a different place is that people want their family safe. They want their children to be able to go to school. They want to be successful. They want to be able to make money, whatever that looks like. And they want to be left alone. I'm telling you, I hear it from every part of Pennsylvania. And so this is really something that I think can bring people together. And we've seen it in York. We have seen this in York County.
Well, very good. DA, Sunday, I do want to zero in on one thing that one of our reporters asked us to bring up. The story's headline said 4 years in jail, 4 weeks on trial, 10 minutes to acquittal. And that story had to do with your prosecution of Tyree Bowie for the beating death of a child, right? And it looks like that there simply wasn't enough evidence. And so I'm wondering if you might want to explain and talk about
Sure.
why did you prosecute that case?
So to begin with, you know, again, during the time that I've been DA, I think it's been close to 40,000 cases have been prosecuted by my office. Okay. And just for the record, our conviction rate is probably close to 97%. And I want you to know that the prosecutors and the police officers that worked on this case, what people don't understand is child abuse cases are some of the absolute most difficult cases you can ever prosecute because oftentimes the only person that saw the crime is the child victim. Okay. So those are unbelievably hard cases. They are cases that, and a lot of people also don't recognize the impact on the police and the prosecutors that work these cases. And I just want to put that out there, and because I always want to say that in context with any question like this. The facts in that case, every time we prosecute a case, we follow the facts and the law. That's how it works. You follow the facts and you apply it to the law. And if you have a good faith basis to proceed, you do. In this case in particular, my office, the York City Police Department, okay, the York City Police Department investigated the case. They brought it to us. We assessed the facts and the law. We took it to trial. And at the end of that trial, the defense attorney made a motion. And the defense attorney said, listen, I don't think they have enough facts to prove this case. I want you to throw this case out. And the judge disagreed. And the judge ruled that we provided enough facts to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt, should the jury agree with us. And the jury didn't agree. And that's what happened. And so it's important to also recognize that when you look at these cases, I mean, there are very few. I mean, there are if you have police and prosecutors that successfully prosecute every case, then you either live in China or Russia, because our democracy is built upon the constitutional protections for a defendant, where we have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, where that defendant doesn't have to lift a finger. Okay, by constitutionally, they don't have to. And so, to that point, very simply, you know what? We lost that case, and that's our democracy. It happens. My heart goes out to that family and to that child every single day, every day. And so, that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I guess the reason they wanted this to be brought up too, it gets to this final question, unless someone else has some, is that, the issue of social justice and of whether people are actually treated fairly by our officials under the law. Do police treat Black people they stop as fairly as they treat white people? Do prosecutors, do DAs prosecute equally? I mean, they don't see race. That this young man happened to be African American, I believe, or a person of color, and there's concern that he was prosecuted because he was Black, right? And there was no evidence. So
that's not
that.
even
Talk about.
that's I'm just gonna
Oh,
I'm
yeah, go right ahead. That's what I'm asking you. Talk about it.
I'm just gonna tell you that's not even there's no world that exists where that's true. It's not even a real thing. The facts, read the transcript of that case. I mean, it was overwhelming. So I'm just going to leave it at that. That's absolutely not true. I mean, to that point, we had a prison death in York County Prison. This would have been like 4 or 5 years ago, and this is public information. I impaneled an investigating grand jury. Okay, so to make sure that we knew exactly what happened to that young man, Everett Palmer, who was a Black man that died in York Prison. I moved mountains and resources because I wanted to make sure that that's not what happened in that case. Okay, and after a thorough, and you can Google and look at the grand jury report, it's like 180 pages. It turned out that that wasn't the case. It turned out that he was high on meth. Okay, but my point is, because I know how important it is, because I understand procedural justice as a prosecutor who's the chair of education and training. I actually compelled a training on procedural justice for all the prosecutors that are members of our association in Pennsylvania, because I understand that if people don't believe in fairness in the process, regardless of the outcome, they're just not going to agree with it. I understand that. And to your point, and I love that you asked me that question, this is one of our issues of the day, where we all have to come together and we all have to have these conversations. There's this documentary called Walking While Black, Love is the Answer. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. If you haven't, Google it. It's a documentary that was made by a documentarian. He's in California, and during 2020, the purpose of the documentary is to create dialogue. And so I actually reached out to him, and he came to the Appel Center via Zoom from California, and we brought together every police, the police chiefs, activists in the Black community, NAACP president. We brought everyone together. We shut the door, and we watched this documentary together. And then we had one of the most meaningful conversations that I've ever had. And as a result of that, our group violence initiative, I mean, we work together every day to achieve justice for our citizens. And when you look at our decrease in gang violence, it's directly attributed to the group violence intervention or group violence initiative, where we hold people accountable. But at the same time, guess what? We embrace redemption and we help people. And we say to them, like, listen, you're in the life. We don't want you to be in it anymore. We'll help you. You want diapers for your kid? We'll do what we can to help you out. Okay. And I'm going to tell you what, to your point, because it's an unbelievably valid and legitimate question. I have seen the positive outcomes when people face it and talk to each other and work through it. We've seen it. And so that I am beyond committed to that, which is why, and I think it's a testament that I have so much support with our Black ministers in the city of York. This is a human issue. This isn't a Republican issue or a Democrat issue or whatever else you want to come up with. It's a human issue. And for those of us, like, I've come to you through a courthouse, And so anyone that has spent time in a courthouse knows that that's humanity in a courthouse. Okay, I've been in one for 17 years, and I have never one time never had a victim or anyone look at me and say, "What are your feelings on, you know, the Republican Party?" or "What's your political affiliation?" When someone's hurt, when they're injured, when they want someone held accountable, when they want their family safe, the base level of being a human comes into play. And that's the world that I grew up in, okay, in this. And that's what I bring to this conversation. And so I don't have all the answers, and anyone that tells you they do is, they're not being truthful. But I can tell you what my experience has been, and I can tell you my views on this, and you can judge how I'm going to behave um, based on my all of these years doing this and what I've hopefully shared with you today.
Well, thank you for addressing that question forthrightly. Yes, Evie, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can't find my raise hand icon. Dave, the AG's office has launched a special unit task force to address human trafficking. And Jan Murphy and I are working on a project looking at human trafficking here in Pennsylvania, which appears to be a real hotbed of human trafficking crimes and
Yes.
activity. Talk about first of all, if elected, would you keep and enhance that unit? And secondly, how would you address human trafficking, which, as you
Yep.
probably know, hasn't received a lot of attention from law enforcement?
I would enhance it. Okay, so we have a lot of human trafficking in York County, and we have a human trafficking task force where I work with the YWCA, and I work with different nonprofits that help victims of human trafficking. And so there's an intersection. We've talked about addiction. We've talked about mental health. Human trafficking is interwoven throughout both of those issues. Okay, I mean, we have prosecuted horrific human trafficking cases, and so what worries me about human trafficking is it's under the layer of other things. Okay, so you have to do thorough investigations to get to it. We recently, and so I'll go be specific to your question. So we will enhance it. Um, Part of that is training the community because most people don't understand, number one, what it means to be trafficked. They don't understand how victims are trafficked. There are police in Pennsylvania that haven't been trained on the topic of human trafficking. So we've trained all of our narcotics police to be able to recognize human trafficking when they see it. And so through that, we've identified victims all over the place that are being trafficked. And so that puts us in a position where you then can get victim services with those individuals. I mean, what a lot of people don't understand is when you have a lot of young kids out there who are addicted to heroin, now fentanyl, and they follow their drug dealer all over the country, and they do whatever that drug dealer asks them to do in return for fentanyl. By law, that is human trafficking. Okay, in our statute, that is human trafficking. And so there are many ways to get there, but I think it's critical that we remember that victim services and saving those kids, that's the most important part of this, is getting them out of there. Now, to that point, because I talked about accountability and redemption, on the accountability side, we have to aggressively identify the people that are financially benefiting off of this. We have to arrest them, prosecute them, and put them in jail. Um, and so this is near and dear to my heart. We have a nonprofit in York called Sparrow Place, where we have a member of their board is a prosecutor in my office. And so I think again, thank you for asking this question, because this impacts families. It destroys children's lives. And so I'm really glad you asked it, but this is very important to me. Very important. And it also ties into the AG's office has an organized retail theft now division. Okay. And it all is tied together. You have people that are addicted, that are being trafficked, that are being told to go steal things and commit retail theft. Okay, and when you enforce these laws, when you enforce the laws as written, and you do it in a manner that's empathetic towards victims, not only do you help the victims, but you can build great cases and you can work your way up and you can get these people that are financially benefiting off of this. And so I plan on utilizing every resource in the Attorney General's office, God willing, I'm elected, to do everything I can to impact this.
Very good. Are there any other questions or
I
follow up?
do.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Can I, another one? Dave, this summer, there was you'll remember there was a case where a prison inmate had been transported to York Hospital, and he escaped custody in the ER, ran across the street to Rest Haven Rehab Center, and he ended up being killed. In your discussion about mental health, in your discussion about responders
Yep.
from the vast law
Yep.
enforcement spectrum,
Yep.
and you ruled, your finding was that there was no excessive force used. The police officer who shot him in the room with a resident, the man had a part of a wheelchair, if I remember correctly, and he was menacing with the part of a wheelchair. Was that, can you use that case to talk about, was that a failure in the part of law enforcement to not properly respond to a mental health situation involving someone in a mental health crisis, overlapping this law enforcement situation?
So that's a great question. And so when we have horrific instances, oftentimes they're lagging indicators of of a societal issue. And in that specific instance, that police officer had a duty to follow the law, and that's what he did. Okay, there's certain things I can't go into detail with because of certain statutory protections for individuals, but I will say very simply, earlier in this call, I mentioned the fact that if you look at really bad circumstances and you walk back in time, okay, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year, maybe it's a few years, maybe it's 10 years, you'll find that a lot of these individuals have been justice involved for a long time from a mental health capacity or substance abuse capacity, and that it wasn't taken care of back then. And so, and what I mean by that is with this specific instance, the officer was justified in the way that he handled it in that room, with the elderly people that were in that room. But when you look at this as a learning point, just like when we looked at Everett Palmer in our prison, you can look at our mental health system and you can say, so right now with our co-responder initiative, of the last 1,000 people that were, and I can provide the specific data, but it's around the last 1,000 people that we had an interaction with, only 3 or 4 went to prison. And I think that the ones that didn't go to prison, or even the ones that did, because of the systems we now have in place, will they not become what we saw down the road? And that goes back to the other point I made about how we live in this social media world where, these are horrific societal human problems, and we have to have the courage to make solutions, knowing that they may be talked about. It could be 20 years from now, and there could be a whole different editorial board, a different person standing here running for AG, and they'll be saying, listen, it's great where we are with mental health, and then we'll all be, hopefully off in retirement land enjoying our lives somewhere. So that's a great question. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, because these mental health issues and making sure that we have the funding and we have the professionals to even perform these services. You can't do something with nothing. We don't have professionals, mental health professionals that want to do this work. You know what I mean? And so when you look at our mental health providers, children, youth and family, probation, police, public defenders, district attorneys, when you look at all of these individuals in society that we can't find people to do these jobs, combined with the fact that we are so much more complex now and the demands are so much higher, we have to be smart about this, and we've got to find solutions. And so where we don't have tragedies like the one that you're talking about happen.
Joyce, final question, I promise.
No, go ahead. That's why you're here. Go ahead.
Dave, as you know, I don't need to tell you that the political landscape in this country is beyond toxic. As an attorney general, how would you endeavor to bring down the volume, to diffuse some of this, critical steam that's, really about to explode?
It's
And thank you for sharing the fact early on. You shared the fact that your wife is from Sri Lanka, and we see that in this toxic cesspool of, the social media driven discourse. People are attacking other people's ethnicities and race and whatnot. And how can and you're the Republican candidate. What message can you offer to people out there across the Commonwealth um, to address this idea of, can we turn the volume down?
So I'm living it every day. I would ask anyone, go look at my social media threads, look at it all, go back as long as you want. And I promise you, that's how I've handled myself as DA. When I'm in I mean, I work with literally everybody, everybody. I have support from all walks of life. And when I talk to people, I'm very optimistic. And I think that a lot of times, what you need is a voice of optimism. Okay. And I don't mean an unrealistic optimism, but I mean like realistic. Like, here's what we're doing. It's working really well. I mean, I am supported in my race by people on the right, people on the left, people in the middle. And one of the things that to your point, I have a unique perspective being in a multiracial marriage. And we have a multiracial son. And I spent a lot of time with my in-laws. I love them very dearly. They're here right now. They flew in to help us for the last whatever days, I think that has enriched my life. It's made and I understand some of the struggles that occur when someone doesn't look like everybody else. And when I say understand, obviously I can't live it, but I mean I have empathy for it by watching it happen. And so, very simply, I can tell you that the reason why I think that I have the support I have from all different areas is because I'm telling you right now, there is a common belief that people just want to know that you're going to do your job and enforce the law, period. They want to know that there's someone who is going to leave politics in the hallway, wherever that is. And they are going to, the way I describe my office right now is it's like a snow globe, and we're inside of it. And all we have are the facts and the law. And all the stuff happening outside of us, it never comes in. It can't ever come in. Okay. And what I have discovered is, people from all political spectrums, that's what they want. I'll never forget, I want to tell the story real quick, is in 2020, at the heat of everything, at the heat of it all, I went and I gave a presentation to um, a group of individuals that you would probably describe as being very conservative. And I stood there and I gave an entire speech on accountability and redemption, holding people accountable and embracing redemption. And when I was done, it was a standing ovation. People wanted to talk to me about substance abuse. There were Vietnam vets who wanted to talk to me about what their life has been like. I gave the identical speech maybe a month later to many, many minority citizens in the city of York, and identical speech, and it was overwhelming reception. And that's the way I've always handled myself. We can't go into people's brains and make them not feel like you can't do that. But what you can do is make sure that every citizen knows that they have an advocate, regardless of who they are, where they're from, what their political background is, that there's a backstop. And I have been the backstop. Um, and I'm going to tell you what, that's why I'm running. I mean, I think we need a backstop. And regardless of what it is or what it looks like, I have lived my career doing that. And so that's what I can say to you. To the best of my ability, that's what I can say to you about the way that I live my life. The reality is, half of our country is conservative. The other half is not. Well, actually, it's probably, I mean, that's a gross, I'm just throwing generally. But the reality is people have got to find a way to live and work together, period. And what I have discovered is when you walk away from high level talking points in social media, cable news, whatever that looks like, and you live your life as a human in your own neighborhood, nobody even pays attention to that stuff. They don't. I mean, that's why I invite any one of you to come to our Reentry Coalition meeting, our group violence intervention meeting. Come to any of them and sit there and just listen to the way we handle business. And that's what I bring to this office. So I appreciate you asking that question. I feel like I feel like we have a very bright future ahead. I really do. I'm optimistic. There's so much. I mean, we're Americans. I served in the Navy. I was in the Persian Gulf, and I was on a ship with 240 sailors. And I promise you that in the normal course of life, we probably wouldn't have been hanging out just because of where we're from and whatever. But these are now my closest friends 30 years later. We had a common mission, we had a common goal, and guess what? Everything went away. And our mission was staying safe, enforcing the Constitution, protecting my fellow sailors. And it's amazing when you have a common mission, what happens. And so that's it.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot. Evie, please don't hold back if you have anything
No, I'm
else.
done. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
How about the rest of our editorial board? Are you guys satisfied? Well, I can't say you didn't answer our questions. You definitely plowed into all of the things that we raised, and I think our readers will now have a clear idea of just how what an important position this is, what important issues are being dealt with by the AG's office, and where you stand on many of them. So I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us, to answer our questions, to really spill out everything so that the voters have the information they need to decide. So again, thank you very much, Mr. Sunday. It was more than an hour. We appreciate your time, and thank you to our editorial board and to our staff, to Evie, for being here with us. And for that, I'll say goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.